Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Own Your Greatness. I'm your host, Sienna Krieg with Melinda Van Fleet. Thank you so much for joining us again. Today, we are going to be exploring the app called Goodreads. You might have heard of it, maybe not. It's a very great tool to keep track of what books you're reading and also looking at the different reviews people have on books to see maybe if you wanted to try reading one or not. But today we are going to be exploring some reviews on the app and seeing how these relate to what makes a good book, what makes a good fiction book.
Awesome, awesome. I had this idea come to me that was a combination, I can't get the word out, of Sienna saying that she uses Goodreads to choose her books. So if you've listened to any of our past episodes, you have heard that. I think we mentioned it a couple times. And I've been on Goodreads since 2021 when I self-published my two nonfiction books. So I knew I needed to give it an update and an overhaul, my Goodreads account. And so a couple weeks ago, I spent some time really like updating my profile, getting, old books off of there. And I was like, gosh, this is like the greatest tool. So it's obviously, as Sienna mentioned, a tool that you can use for your own, reading purposes. But it's also a tool where if you do a deep dive and look at all the reviewers, and that's what's so incredible, the reviewers, you can really pick up like what is important in a book, like why they liked the book, why they didn't like the book. And those are amazing writing tips for any of us out there that are working on writing a book or just working in general on becoming a better writer. Because let me tell you, it is work. Like these books just don't drop into people's heads and you start typing them out and it's some like genius thing. It's really not. And I've definitely learned that since I started studying everything in November, like seriously studying becoming a fiction writer. So I just was like blown away by the amount of greatness in a lot of these reviewers in terms of what they were sharing about what they liked or didn't like. So I had the idea, I ran it by Sienna. She was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And so I sent her an email that was pretty simple. And I just kind of gave her like a little bit of a starting ground in terms of what we're looking for and what we're trying to achieve. And so I'm going to toss it back to Sienna for her to share how she then took that, just general, like, hey, these are the things we're going to look at, and ran with it to come up with her own process of how to use Goodreads as a tool to improve your writing. So take it away.
Yes, so I found three books on Goodreads, fiction books, and I just searched the fiction genre section, and these were books that I've never read. I've heard of most of them, but I've never read them, and I'm pretty sure they're pretty popular. And then I found one five-star review for each of them. And then I found one or two star review about the same books. And then I screenshotted them on my phone, so I'll be looking at that later and just kind of seeing like what similarities and differences these good reviews had and the bad reviews had, and kind of like what was the difference between the people that really liked the books and then the difference between the people that just it wasn't for them. So,
Oh, wow. I love that. So the difference between the people, the difference between the writers. So that's a really cool level. That's awesome. And in general, that is very cool. So what I want people to get from this podcast too is using something as a tool, but then adapting it for how you wish to use it, right? So you may listen to something Sienna just said and be like, okay, I like this, or I do this, or I want to do this, and then tweak it your way that works for you, or something that I said. So Sienna just added like a whole other level in terms of doing a deep dive into the reviewers to really understand a little bit more about them, right? Because we're all different. We all have different, opinions and viewpoints and things we're trying to achieve. So that is super, super cool. For me, what I did was a little similar, but I, with a book in my head that I knew I didn't necessarily like. So a book that I didn't like personally, and I also don't want to, let's say, be like that book series. So nothing against the book series, the author, nothing like that. And I also made sure that it was a very popular series and it was in my genre that I'm writing in. So it's not fully like 100% in my genre. This book series is fantasy romance, and I'm more fantasy sci-fi worldview. So it's, but it has some similarities, let's say. So what I then did was I pulled the book up on Goodreads and found the worst reviews. I went like right for the jugular. So again, and I, like nothing bad, again, nothing bad against the author. I just wanted to go like right to the jugular. What is the strongest feedback that these reviewers have? And I made sure the reviewers are reviewers that had, hundreds of followers and have put out at least over 200 reviews. And what I noticed was a lot of similarities in those reviews. And so I was like, okay, I'm onto something here. So that was like, wow, I'm really onto something in terms of understanding, what are people looking for that's very, um, was very prevalent and against perhaps what they wanted to see from this particular author and her book series. So then I followed those reviewers and then I went to books where they gave them 5 stars. So I went from like 1 and 2 star reviews to 5 stars. So 4 stars is nice, but 4 stars is one of those like, I don't know, like I give 4 stars weight, but there's a lot to be said about 4 stars. So I wanted the 5 stars. So I went to make sure that reviewers gave 5 stars along the way, and they weren't just never giving a 5 star because of their ego and they don't want to give someone a 5 star. So I wanted to make sure that they truly were people that would give a 5 star if it warranted it, and they had the experience then to give the 5 star. So, because I was looking at this from a very critical lens in terms of understanding what makes a really great fiction book. So then I looked at what they wrote about in regards to the books that were 5 star books. And I looked to see, what was the genre, because a lot of these reviewers are cross genre, which is totally fine. They may be chosen by a publisher to be an ARC reviewer and do review right before the book comes out. But for the most part, then too, it will say, thank you for choosing me as an ARC reviewer. This is an open, honest review. And you can obviously see that when you read the review. So yeah, so that was super, super compelling. So then what I did, and I'll toss it back to Sienna in a second, was I created a list of what I call my KPIs for writing a fiction book. So do you know what a KPI is, Sienna?
I do not.
Okay, no worries. And I asked because the majority of people watching this probably do not, and no shame to that at all. So I wanted to explain. But a KPI is something that's used in the business world, and that's my background is retail, and KPI means key performance indicator. So when you have a business, like even like your uncle and I have a business together, there's different things that we measure and you can call them KPIs. So for example, when I then looked at the reviews in conjunction with also the studying I'm doing from other books and YouTubers, pacing is one, character development is two, the inner and outer voice is three. What type of, the protagonist is are they likable? The antagonist doesn't need to be a villain. So there's all sorts of indicators that you can make as like your own personal checklist for when you go to write your book, you need to be your own harshest critic first and build up that, layer of thick skin. So then when you give it to an editor, a developmental editor, hopefully, that is who you're going to choose, then they can give you some even more feedback. But you at least are very familiar with hitting these key performance indicators, excuse me, along the way as you write and as you go through your revisions. You're always like thinking about the different indicators that you want to make sure you've covered in your fiction piece. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Do you guys talk about anything like this in school, in your classes? No? Okay.
No, no.
Just curious. And always please share if there's something that we hit on that you do. I would love to hear that
Okay.
because I didn't go to school for journalism. I went to school for retail. So I have no idea like what's covered in a curriculum as professor or teacher or anything like that. This is all just my own learnings along the way that I'm sharing.
Yeah.
So so why don't you share some of the reviews that you found and maybe some of the key performance indicators now that you understand what that is that you picked up on that you would think are important?
Okay. So the first book that I found on Goodreads was um The Night Circus, and I'm getting my phone out right now to find the review, the 5-star review. Let me see. So the first review, all the reviews that I found were really lengthy, which I liked because sometimes I do like shorter reviews on Goodreads for my own purposes, but for this purpose, I kind of wanted to get a bit of a lengthier one. Um, this review was 5 stars, and one of the quotes from this review says, "A lot of time is spent describing delicate and beautiful enchantments and illusions. A lot of time is spent describing the courses at exotic dinners. There is a distinct interest in fashion, interior design, and the layout decoration of this circus. It's not a deeply philosophical book or a deeply literary one, and it has a strong romantic element to it. So very different from the kind of reads that I've been enjoying lately. But this reader said that because it was different and it kind of like wasn't as intense as other books as they read, they thought this was really interesting, and they thought how the detail to these different things that usually aren't really brought out in other books was very interesting to them. And so that contributed to their 5 stars. They said again, this is why I gave it a 5 stars because I read this book in a very short amount of days, which rarely happens to them. So clearly they were pretty interested in the book. And I can agree with that. If I really, really like a book, like I will finish it in like a day or two. So I can completely understand that. Um, and they said that the work of imagination in the book was really apparent, and there was an element of mystery, romance, and the components of the circus that were just very cool and well thought out of. So that was the 5-star review for the Night Circus.
Cool. So
Yeah.
out of that, if you were writing a book, what would you go, okay, I really want to make sure that I hit on these things that that reviewer brought up?
I would definitely want to hit on describing, just like they said, the delicate and beautiful elements, just the random, like it could be the randomest stuff, but like describing those in detail, as it said, like the work of imagination. So just bringing in your imagination, bringing in something that may not seem like really possible at first, but then thinking more about it and saying, well, this could be really good. Like we can make something out of this.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And those were the two things that I picked up on as well when you were um reading the review. So everything has a yin and a yang, right? So let's say the yin is that there's the reviewer mentioned the descriptions and that the yang is that you have to also keep in mind when you read through the reviews, there's a lot of people talk about info dumping. Do you know what info dumping means?
Isn't that just putting way too much
Yeah.
information?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd be curious then. a next step that I would then do, and that's what I have been doing, is then go to the library or buy the book, whatever you wish, to see, okay, how did this author do that, right? Did they do
Mm-hmm.
it where it's like, two sentences, so it's just kind of weaved in throughout the whole story, or, was it info dumping, which is definitely something that the majority of, writing coaches and editors would definitely say to stay away from. So,
Yeah.
and then the imagination piece is really interesting because, we're living in a world that is full of overconsumption and people are getting more and more dense and
Mm-hmm.
not using their imagination, right? So it would be interesting then to do a deep dive on that author and see if there's any YouTubes out there where they're interviewed and they talk about imagination. They talk about,
Yeah.
less consumption or different, ways that they increase their, imagination and get back to self. So yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Love it.
And then I'll move on to the 1-star review that I found of this book. This one was kind of funny. I really like when people write funny reviews about like 1 or 2 star books that they thought. I think it's hilarious what they do. Um, here's one part of it. It says, but really, the author knows how to write for sure. The plot, though, it's about a circus, but not any kind of circus. It's a magical circus. I know, right? Astounding. I hope you really, really, really want to know this circus that you crave for, that you can't breathe until you know every detail about this circus, how they perform in the circus, what they eat, what they wear. And oh, the lights. Who are they, you're asking? Irrelevant. So it's kind of like showing that this side is saying, I think this person's saying there's maybe too much detail instead, and it's not really showing much about the characters themselves. It's just showing like the setting more. And you can tell this person is frustrated. This person says it's about a circus and many characters whose names I can't recall. So
You know,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so left an impact, but not in the way that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd have to check my notes, but I just finished the 6 week story grid program, which I highly recommend anyone out there if you're into writing tips, if you're not subscribed to Story Grid on YouTube, please subscribe. It's an amazing program, and I highly recommend the 6 week program I just finished. But I want to say one of the scenes that we dissected in terms of the five commandments and object of desire was from that book. So I'll have to go back and see. And it was good. It was a good scene. I didn't feel like it was over info dumping or anything like
Hmm.
that. So yeah. And then it's funny too, when I was prepping for the podcast, that book was in someone's like recommend or
Oh,
whatever on
really?
Goodreads. Yeah.
That's
So I'm like,
funny.
am I being called to like read that book?
Maybe you are.
Maybe I am. I'll put it
That's
on my
funny.
Goodreads list. So yeah. Which is what's so great about that app is like if someone tells you a book, right? You can just use that
Hmm.
book as your tool to keep track instead of a gazillion like, sticky notes and writing in
Yeah.
a journal and then losing in the piece of paper. So
Yeah. I really like Goodreads because it has that ability to tell you what percent you're on through page numbers, and then you can write
Mhm.
notes about it. Like I remember reading this one book. I can't recall, but it was very recent, and I think I wrote in the middle of it, I was like, I don't think I'm gonna be continuing this series or something because I was just getting so bored.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you use it then to keep pace?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Huh. I haven't gotten
Yeah.
that far, so that's cool. Good share. Love it. Yeah. It did take me a little bit to find you on Goodreads though. So that was a little frustrating. I need to reach out to Jeff Bezos and give him that feedback. But but it's
It
easy
is
to
it is hard to find people on that app.
it's like where do I find you to be your
Yeah,
friend?
it
So
is really hard.
so yeah, so if anyone's struggling with that, like I think you go in the top right and there's little YouTube videos out there about that. But it's very easy to follow the reviewers.
Hmm.
So That was cool. So how many reviewers do you follow? Do you know?
I think I only follow, I can go on there right now. I follow I'm friends with a lot of people on there, like with my friends, but I'm only following, I'm friends with one reviewer. Um, her name, oh my gosh, what is her profile name? It just says her name is Allie L, but she has read 992 books.
I'm
She,
friends with her too. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
she has that. I follow her because she's really funny. She is
Yes.
just really funny and witty reviews,
Mhm.
and I just really enjoy seeing them. And I'm like, oh, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I'll so it's so anyone out there, if you're looking to start this or you want to follow more reviewers, so it's Allie, so Ali, and then the letter, so like as
yes,
her last name. So I follow Heather X, so Heather and then an X,
okay,
Clace, Clace, Rowan, Rowan, and then Manas, Manas. So shout out because to be a reviewer and be reading at this pace and then writing these like really in like detailed reviews with like lots of feedback is truly incredible.
hmm
It's almost like a short story or long blog. And it's
yeah,
it's like wow. It's very impressive. So yeah, so I have a lot to live up to if I want a good review from these reviewers someday. And
yeah.
you
It's
need some thick
impressive.
skin. Yeah, it's very
Yeah,
impressive. And you need some thick skin. So, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, but it's just been a great tool. And then also too, you can see when a book's coming out from the reviewers that they have it on their list and kind of like keep tabs on a lot of these books too, because there's so many, so many. So, yeah. And then also in the groups, I'm in the sci-fi group. So you can
Oh,
see in the sci-fi group, it's only one I'm in so far, because literally I've just kind of been working on this a little bit over the last 2 weeks. But you can see in the sci-fi group, you can see what books are being discussed. So that's like another tool also if you're kind of looking either for something to read or some way to learn some feedback or tips to add to your KPIs. So yeah. Cool. Did you want to share anything
yes.
else?
I can do my next book, or do you want to do your review
I
first?
kept mine more general, like in terms of
Okay.
things I was looking for. So you share the review. It's all good.
Okay. The next review I have is actually a Leigh Bardugo book. It's Ninth House, and I've heard, I haven't read it because it is fantasy, but I've heard it's also a little bit of horror in it as well. And I'm personally not interested in horror. I just don't like it, but I thought it'd be interesting to see her reviews because it is a very popular book. Um, this 5-star review, talks mainly about how her characters were very incredibly well painted. And I can agree with that for her other books as well, like Six of Crows and Shadow and Bone. Love the characters. Like I feel like you can get a really strong attachment to them, which shows like how well done and how well written they are. Um, let me see what else this one says.
I
It
agree with
says,
that with the books for sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Great character
Um,
development.
the plot, she says the plot is twisted and delivers an explanation that adds new possibilities that no reader could have expected. So that brings a level of excitement to the book as well. Um, she says the book is violent, and again, that's why I personally am not going to read it. But they this reader says that this makes the book a little bit better because it can be um relatable to some people that are going through, what does it say? It says there's sexual abuse in it and trauma, and so some readers can relate to what's being written on the page. Um and I think this reviewer said that like she just feels like it personally just relates with her. And so if it's kind of nice to her that it's like written out on the page and she can relate to something. Um but yeah. This was a longer review as well. I think the biggest thing was that the characters were really well written and the plot twists were well done.
Yeah. Yeah. And then was there a 2-star review for that one
Oh
too?
yes, yes. Um, this 1-star review is a bit shorter.
Okay.
The first part it says, "Oh, talk about disappointment." Um, this person was really excited to read this book because they've read her other books, and they said that they didn't have any clue what was going on. They didn't understand some of the characters at all, and they realized like a lot of stuff halfway through that they should have understood right in the beginning, apparently. So they just didn't really understand it.
Hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
not into horror either or books with heavy trauma.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to your point to see from an author that you like, and I like her too, what someone has to say in terms of another genre. So that's really
Yeah.
interesting. So what I found too that is interesting with the same kind of exercise, which is why I wanted to have this podcast be like this in terms of exploration and then having people hopefully be inspired to create their own system, is that
Hmm.
you took a book and looked at the 5 and looked at the 2, and you took books you didn't read. And I took books that I did read or read a little bit and returned or put down. And I looked at the worst and then went to the reviewer and then looked at the reviewer's 5-star. Does that make sense? So so I just took it differently. And there's no right or wrong. That's my point. Like there's no right or
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
It's however you wanted to then look at it. Um, so you did it by book and book you read, 5 and 2. I did it by book you didn't read. I did it by a book I read, let's say, and looked at the worst and then looked at the reviewer to what they liked
Okay.
the best. So for me, I'm trying to hit that audience, right? So to me, the audience is the reviewers. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
yeah. So again, either way, or if someone out there has their own way to twist that up, right? Because there's so many ways you could look at it, right?
Yeah,
So you're looking at
absolutely.
the book. Did you read the book? Did you not read the book? The genre, the star, the reviewer. Like it's like a big,
There's so much.
puzzle
Yeah.
that you can put together in so many different ways and create your own system
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
deciphering the feedback, really. So yeah, yeah, I think it's really fun. The only thing I want to say too for everyone out there, and I have said this before, and I strongly, strongly believe this, especially with what's going on in the world, and that is don't get so sucked into all this. You need to be writing. If you're writing a book, or if you're a writer, or if you want to be writing or blogging or anything, make sure you're doing that too, and you're not just consuming content. So watching
Yeah.
this podcast is obviously consuming content. Spending a shit ton of time on Goodreads is obviously consuming content. Reading too many books and not writing your own things is obviously consuming content. So make sure you develop your own system that works for you, whether it's you're timing yourself every day or giving yourself a certain amount of time every week to consume content, timing yourself to write, whether it's by the hour or by word count, come up with your
Hmm.
own system to make sure you're doing the thing and you're not
Yeah.
just in this content consumption mode, which actually
Yeah.
just clogs your brain and makes you like a zombie. So
Yeah.
So yeah, and for me, what's been working really great is to be like consuming the books that are helping me, not the fiction books, but the books from editors and from experts that I've purchased and writing like along the way, like using them as tools to kind of keep going and fine tune as I'm writing. So, 'cause yes,
Yeah.
there's a lot of fine tuning. So,
Yes. Yes. I think it's also important to remember like not everyone's going to like your book. Like there's always going to be somebody. Like you can't prevent it. So,
No,
like, there's
you
everyone
can't.
has different likes and dislikes. Like, somebody's not going to like your book, and you just kind of
Mhm.
have to accept that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I love that you brought that up because, like, when I was with my friend a couple weeks ago, she told me about someone she knows, and actually, I do want to read the book, um, and a book that she wrote. So I went to Goodreads. I'm like using, I practice what I preach. I went to Goodreads. I found it on Goodreads, so I marked it that I want to read it, and I looked, and I between 4 stars and 5 stars she had like, let's say 86% was, so I was like, that's awesome. That's like amazing. So if
Hmm.
you can, and she's a first time novelist. So I was like, gosh, in your first time to be able to have, on Goodreads, you know, like an 86% between the 4 and the 5, I think that's like
That's
truly amazing.
impressive.
So yeah, it's really impressive. So yeah, so that's kind of my little you know, way to look at it. So,
Yeah.
and what do you do? Do you add it up too, or do you when you're deciding to read a book?
Like I said, I would like look at the back, obviously the description, and then occasionally, which I think I brought up the very first podcast that we did, um, I will look at the reviews on Goodreads. Um, it's also hard though because I try to find the ones that don't have spoiler alerts because it's like just in case if I want to actually read the book. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. The spoiler alerts can be a buzzkill.
yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. I love it. Well, this was super fun. I hope everyone got something from this podcast. So please share
Yes.
in the comments, like if you use Goodreads, if you have your own system, please share. We can all learn from each other. If this is a new tip for you, please give us a shout out that this was a new tip and you liked it. We're just trying, as we're both like learning and moving and grooving in our writing journeys, to
Yes.
share what we learn along the way and keeps ourselves motivated, right?
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. You want to close this up?
Yeah, thank you everybody for watching. We really appreciate it. Definitely go check out Goodreads now that you've been watching this. It's a great tool just for reviewing and just to read books. Keep your progress in what you're reading. It's fantastic. Thank you again for watching. We really appreciate it. Tune in to our older videos and then also for future videos as well. So thank you for watching.
So, thanks everyone. Bye for now. Thanks, Sienna.